Logging can be thought of as a four-step process: felling the timber, skidding the trees, sorting and handling the logs, and transporting the logs or other raw materials. On any logging job, the greatest potential for water quality problems usually centers on skid trails. This is because of the bare soil that results from dragging the logs or trees along the ground, and the repeated passes made by heavy equipment. To address these and other water quality concerns, North Carolina developed the Forest Practices Guidelines related to water quality, commonly known as the FPGs. These rules promote the protection of water quality during forestry activities, and there are 9 sections. Even though all 9 sections apply to a forestry operation, at least 2 of the FPGs specifically mention skid trails. One tool that you can use to help comply with the FPGs are Best Management Practices, or BMPs. This video briefly outlines some BMPs that you may want to use for your skid trails. Pre-harvest planning helps you identify areas on the site where skid trails could give you trouble. Take some time before the logging starts to lay out where the skid trail should go, or it may be easier to recognize places on the job site where they should not go. Pre-harvest planning is your opportunity to come up with a plan of action for avoiding those problem areas. Some examples of potential problem areas to avoid: stream crossings, streamside zones, steep slopes, especially those greater than 25% in grade, persistent wet soil areas, rock outcrops, soil areas with high risk for erosion, and gas lines, power lines, or other utility corridors. While it may not be practical to avoid these areas on every logging job, pre-harvest planning can help you determine the best place to locate your skid trails. But remember, the best skid trail for water quality best management practices may not always be the shortest distance from the woods to the deck. You may have to go around a wet area, or use switchbacks in steep country, or pull a little further to keep from having to construct a new road. With well laid out skid trails, you can avoid making unnecessary trips with the skidders. Use topographic maps, soil surveys, aerial photos, and your own knowledge from inspecting the site to help you determine where to locate your skid trails. Good location and layout of a skid trail should minimize runoff and erosion. No 2 logging operations are the same, and each site requires its own unique attention. While there are many different BMP options, there are a few basic concepts that apply on most any tract. Keep the number and size of the skid trails to a minimum. This reduces the bare soil area that is exposed and the amount of soil disturbance from equipment passes. And the less bare soil you have, the better chance of controlling runoff and erosion. Preventing intensive soil disturbance is especially important. This includes rutting, compacting, souping, or churning of the upper soil layers. One way to help prevent this from happening is to use leftover logging debris, things like slash, laps, limbs, or tree tops, as a cushioning layer on top of the most frequently used skid trails. To be most effective, you should lay down the logging debris right from the start, and continue with each return trip to the woods. Simply placing some limbs or branches on a skid trail once it becomes a problem usually won't solve the problem. Using logging debris on your main skid trails can also protect the soil from gouging that may occur by the logs or trees being pulled. If these gouges are left unchecked, they can funnel runoff and quickly become erosion risks. Be sure to correct these problems before they get out of hand. One specialized method of minimizing soil disturbance from a skid trail is to use full-length logs, laid down lengthwise on the ground and packed tightly together. These logs become the foundation for the actual skid trail. This type of skid trail is referred to as a shovel mat, shovel road, or corduroy trail. The idea is to keep the most frequent passes of the skidders on top of these corduroy logs, which minimizes soil disturbance and protects water quality. Once the harvesting is complete, the corduroy logs are pulled up and processed for delivery to the mill. Streamside zones, or SMZs, are sensitive areas and warrant special attention. If a skid trail must be placed within an SMZ or a stream crossing is needed, the North Carolina FPGs outline the requirements that must be met. Be sure to review and understand what the FPGs require. In these cases, take extra precautions to keep runoff, sediment, and other potential pollution from getting into the water. skid trails should be kept at least 10 feet away from the stream or other water body. You should also maintain suitable ground cover, such as logging debris, so water can more easily soak into the ground and won't run off. Use straw bales, sediment pits, or other effective methods of controlling and capturing runoff and sediment. Remember this basic concept when controlling runoff. Slow it down and spread it out. If it is necessary to cross a stream, consider using bridge mats. Bridge mats are heavy steel or wood panels that can be placed across a stream or ditch channel. Equipment can then travel free and clear over the water channel, providing a high degree of environmental protection. The North Carolina Forest Service has bridge mats available to borrow, as a way to educate the forestry community on the benefits of using them. Logging activities often can affect how water flows across the ground surface. To minimize these effects, it is important to control runoff on the skid trail. Controlling the amount and speed of runoff can go a long way towards protecting water quality and reducing the risk of soil erosion. A key to accomplishing this is to establish frequent breaks in the grade by dividing a single continuous slope into shorter sections. This allows better control of the runoff. One way to establish a break in the grade is to set your skid trails in a zigzag pattern, commonly known as a switchback. Filter areas or other BMPs should be used to capture the runoff at the end of each turn in the switchback. Another way to break the grade is to use a rolling dip, which is a shallow angled depression partially excavated out of the skid trail surface. Water runoff is diverted off of the skid trail, through the dip, and allowed to filter into the ground alongside the skid trail. In addition to breaking the grade, another method of controlling runoff is to use leftover logging debris as a cushioning layer on top of frequently used skid trails. This layer of debris not only cushions the soil from the heavy equipment, but also reduces the impact of heavy rains on the soil. This same method can work for your logging decks and stream crossing approaches. But beware! Heavy runoff may occur beneath the packed down logging debris. Do not expect this debris layer to accomplish all of your needs for controlling runoff, especially on steep ground and highly erodible soils. Now a quick review of basic BMPs when using skid trails. Keep the number and size of the skid trails to a minimum. Stay away from streamside zones and avoid crossing streams. And control runoff by creating a break in the grade, packing down logging debris, or simply by keeping the grade of the skid trail to a minimum. Once a skid trail is no longer needed, stabilizing it is important to ensure long-term water quality protection. The North Carolina FPGs require that site stabilization take place on areas where accelerated erosion may occur. Again, read and understand what the FPG standards require you to accomplish. Instead of waiting until the entire job is finished, do the necessary closeout work on your skid trails as you move around the tract. By quickly stabilizing the skid trail, you reduce the amount of time the skid trail will lay bare with exposed soil. Rehabilitating skid trails as quickly as possible is especially important on stream crossings and along streamside zones. Doing the needed stabilization work in small steps can reduce the time it takes to move on to the next job site, since much of your closeout work will already have been done. Even after the skid trail is no longer needed, controlling runoff is vital to protect water quality. Remember those two important factors of controlling runoff: slow it down and spread it out. One good method of accomplishing this is to construct water bars. Vehicles and equipment should not drive over the water bars once they are installed, because doing so will break them down. Water bars do not trap runoff, they divert runoff across the ground to soak into the soil. There are some important features of a water bar that demand a closer look. Angle the water bar diagonally across the skid trail. Setting the water bar at angle keeps water from pooling behind it. Excavate a shallow trench along the uphill side of the water bar. This trench should remain free of debris so it can drain the runoff into a suitable filter area. Mound the excavated soil while coming from uphill to create the actual water bar hump. Pack down this soil mound so it remains firm and does not wash away. Remember, simply pushing up a long, skinny pile of dirt typically does not create a functioning water bar. Tie in the upslope end of the water bar with the cut bank if there is one. This is a needed step to keep the runoff from seeping around the water bar. If no cut bank exists, be sure to extend the water bar well beyond the edges of the skid trail. Now let's spend the next couple minutes watching the construction of this water bar. decide to use water bars or some other BMPs, remember the two basic steps for controlling runoff: slow it down and spread it out. A quick and easy method to space water bars can be accomplished by using an eye-level method. First, stand at the bottom of the slope and look straight ahead into the grade. Where your sight line meets the slope grade is where your first water bar should be constructed. Next, while standing at the sighted location for water bar number 1, repeat the process by sighting straight ahead into the grade to position the second water bar. Continue these steps until you reach the top of the slope. However, when doing the actual construction of each water bar, you should begin at the top of the slope and work your way back down. Once the water bar is constructed, you may need to use additional BMPs to capture the sediment released from the water bar. Some good examples include sediment pits, hay bales, or filter areas. With the skid trails closed out and water bars installed, it's time to establish ground cover to stabilize any critical bare soil areas. Rehabilitation near streams and at crossings is particularly important. Some rehabilitation options include seeding and mulching with appropriate grasses or vegetation, installing erosion-control blankets, or hydro-seeding, which is a slurry of water, fiber mulch, seed, and fertilizer. No matter what methods you use, the important thing is to establish ground cover that will allow water runoff to soak in while filtering sediment out. Using BMPs on a skid trail can save time, improve productivity, reduce the visual impact of a logging job, and, most of all, help protect our water quality. To recap, remember these major points for good skid trail BMPs. Plan and lay out the skid trails before the harvest in a way that avoids trouble spots such as streams, steep slopes or rock outcrops, utility corridors, or unstable soils. Keep away from streamside zones and avoid crossings if at all possible. If a stream crossing is needed, consider using bridge mats. Minimize soil disturbance on the skid trails while controlling the runoff. Slow it down and spread it out. In wet areas, you may find it helpful to lay down corduroy logs as a shovel mat for the equipment to travel upon. Pack down leftover tree tops or limbs as a cushioning layer on the most heavily trafficked skid trails. Finally, be sure to stabilize and rehabilitate your skid trails so that your BMP work remains intact and functioning. Installing BMPs may take some extra time up front, but that time invested usually results in less costs and improved water quality. Proper implementation of BMPs on skid trails and elsewhere on your logging job can help you meet the requirements of the North Carolina FPGs. Don't forget, today's harvests are tomorrow's healthy forests. The North Carolina Forest Service has portable steel or wood bridge mats available for loggers to borrow for stream or ditch crossings. Contact your nearest Forest Service district office to learn more about bridge mats or other BMP topics, or visit us at the website shown on the screen.